wait till I get back and see him. Wait till I slap a gun. Alright, yeah. Yeah, wait. Wait till I come back in the market late night. And then it's just you and I you up.
Children gonna be children. Kids will be kids, man. You know what I'm saying? I expect that from them. I expect them to do the wrong thing.
Word on the street is that King Harris's reckless mouth behind bars may have finally crossed a line he can't walk back from. People close to the situation claim the talk coming out of jail has gotten serious, the kind of talk that stops sounding like rumors and starts sounding like warnings. Insiders say his father, T.I., has been scrambling behind the scenes, trying to calm things down and clean up the damage before it spreads any further. But by the time word reaches the outside, it usually means the situation inside has already moved past the point of simple repair. And the whispers coming out of those walls aren't small. According to people who claim to know what's happening on the inside, some inmates weren't just talking about roughing King up or teaching him a lesson. The language being used was darker than that. Some were allegedly talking about silencing him permanently. In places like that, words carry weight. And when enough people repeat the same threat, it stops sounding like empty talk. Suddenly, the heat around him starts to feel real. This wasn't just jailhouse chatter anymore. It was the kind of pressure that can follow someone day and night. The situation surrounding King Harris didn't spiral overnight.
Well, I'm saying that you weren't allowed to turn left right there because it's separated by those double yellow lines.
I apologize.
I got you. Do you have your license on you?
The chain of events that led here started much earlier. And like most stories that end in chaos, it began with something that seemed small at first. The traffic stop that flipped King's world upside down wasn't just another random police encounter. It was the spark that set everything else in motion. Picture the moment. A 20-year-old King Ciandre Harris, the son of Atlanta rap legend Clifford T.I. Harris Jr., cruising through the quiet suburbs behind the wheel of a black BMW. On the surface, it looked like any other late-night drive. Nothing about it suggested the kind of moment that would later spread across social media timelines and news reports. But behind the tinted windows of that car, the situation was already moving towards something bigger. Within minutes, what should have been a routine ride turned into a moment that echoed across Twitter, Instagram, and WorldStar.
Go and step it up. Okay, Mr. Harris. Okay, we gotta have a talk about something else, so keep your hands on the steering wheel for me.
King had been active online, showing off his lifestyle, flashing jewelry, leaning into the image of a young artist chasing attention in the rap world. From the outside, it looked like confidence. But the reality waiting for him that night wasn't something fame, money, or studio sessions could shield him from. And like so many moments that spiral out of control, it started with something small. A traffic violation. The kind of thing most drivers assume will end with a warning or a ticket. But in certain neighborhoods, small mistakes can turn into serious problems in a matter of seconds. According to reports from Fox 5 Atlanta and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, King nearly sideswiped a Dunwoody police cruiser while pulling out of a gas station. It happened quickly. One moment the BMW was easing into traffic, and the next moment the patrol car was reacting instantly.
I smell some weed in the car, so our procedures, we gotta check it. Is there anything else that I need to be aware of?
Nah, I don't want y'all to check the car.
I can't hear you.
I don't want y'all to search the car.
Well, I understand that, but if I smell weed, that's probable cause to search the vehicle.
You're not gonna find them. You're gonna find my guns.
Just multiple guns?
I got a stick, an AR.
Flashing blue lights filled the rearview mirror as officers swung their vehicle around and initiated the stop. The BMW was pulled over and brought to a complete halt. At that point, it might have still looked like a routine encounter. But what unfolded next made it clear this wasn't going to end with a simple citation. As the officer approached the vehicle, the first thing he noticed was the smell. The scent of loud smoke rolled out of the car as the window lowered, but that wasn't the only thing catching attention.
You seem like a cool kid. I don't want anything to come out of this, so let's just make sure that the warrant's valid and go from there, okay? So they did confirm it, so the warrant is valid and they do want you. Well, and now that I'm thinking about it, I want you to make sure that You know your rights. I'm gonna read your Miranda real quick. Just give me 1 sec.
The officer's eyes quickly locked onto something even more serious. Sitting on King's hip was a firearm. From that moment on, the tone of the stop changed instantly. What began as a minor traffic situation turned into something far more serious within seconds. The shift was immediate, and anyone watching the footage later could feel that tension building. Body camera footage released in 2025 showed the entire encounter in clear detail. The officers kept their voices steady and controlled, explaining the reason for the stop and asking King to step out of the vehicle. On the surface, everything looked calm.
What I would appreciate more than anything right now is to be able to make a phone call. So when we get there, it can already be figured out.
To who? Who are you trying to make a phone call to?
I'm trying to make a phone call to my pop.
King's about to have a son.
King's about to have a son. Congrats.
Yeah. And I told him I'm gonna make this the greatest gangster of all times. I will raise this child to torture you the way that you tortured me.
But underneath that calm was a tension you could almost feel through the screen. Then came the moment that changed everything. When officers ran King's legal name through the system, the results came back almost immediately. The database flagged an active bench warrant out of Pickens County, Georgia. That notification was the turning point. The moment the entire situation shifted from a traffic stop into something much bigger. Once that warrant appeared on the screen, the direction of the night was no longer in question.
Trying to coddle him for. Let the man walk off, have some time to himself, sit down, soak it up, and come up with what he needed.
King Harris's situation had taken a serious turn, one that would follow him from the roadside straight into jail and eventually into a storm of consequences that few people saw coming. And the warrant itself wasn't for something minor. It was connected to a failure to appear in court, a legal issue that had been sitting unresolved for years. To understand how it reached that point, you have to rewind the timeline back to 2022. That's when King Harris was first pulled over and hit with multiple charges at once.
What you want to do? What you want to do? From here?
Yeah, I'm from here. Yeah, I'm from here.
All right, so... Oh, hell, y'all, let's go. What's up with you, bro?
I've already made my peace with it. Because I know that energy. I was that energy. I know exactly how it's going to turn out. Son, think I ain't spoke to my son? Think I ain't told my son, his mama, and his grandmama, his ass going to prison. If he goddamn keep that shit up, his ass going to prison.
According to reports, the stop resulted in 3 separate accusations: speeding, driving under the influence of drugs, and operating a vehicle while knowingly holding a suspended license. Those charges didn't just disappear. They followed him forward, quietly building pressure in the background. And when he failed to appear in court over that case, the system responded the only way it knows how. According to Rolling Out, that decision would eventually come back to catch up with him in a way he couldn't ignore. These were the kinds of charges many people would normally see as minor setbacks. For most drivers, misdemeanors like that might feel like temporary trouble, something that gets handled quickly and forgotten just as fast. But in King's case, the situation unfolded differently.
With the T.I. situation, if he did that, you're a fucking rat too. I don't spare no motherfucking body. Because if you doing anything wrong, you doing anything criminal-wise, and you cooperate with law enforcement to get you out of trouble, that means you're cooperating, that means you're a rat.
You have any questions for me? I don't. You need anything to go with you?
My phone.
Your phone? Where's your phone at?
Your phone.
We're in the car.
You search you.
I'm not looking for phones, I'm looking for drugs and guns.
The issue wasn't only the charges themselves. The real problem was what happened after. When the official court notice was mailed out in September of 2024, it never reached him. The envelope was returned marked undelivered somewhere in Georgia. Inside the legal system, details like that can quietly change everything. Once a court date passes without an appearance, even if the original charges are small, the consequences escalate quickly. Anyone familiar with the system understands how it works. Miss a court appearance, even for something that began as a routine traffic case, and the court doesn't simply forget. A bench warrant gets issued.
Tell me, it been 20 years, bro. It been 20 years. I figure if I wasn't built like that, it'll show by now. It been 20 years, bro. I done faced every challenge motherfucking that life could throw at me, man. You ain't seen me fold, you ain't seen me break down.
I need that after.
From that point forward, that warrant sits in the system waiting. It doesn't expire quietly, and it doesn't fade away over time. It stays there, ready to surface the next time law enforcement runs your name. That's exactly what happened here. So, when October arrived and King nearly sideswiped that Dunwoody police cruiser pulling out of the gas station, that unresolved warrant was already sitting in the system like a trap waiting to be triggered.
Wayne, wait, you gone too fucking far, dog. That is a male. A 12-year-old. At 12, they don't even know what their next meal gonna be.
The moment officers initiated the stop, the clock started moving toward a result that had technically been waiting for months. By the time the flashing lights appeared behind the BMW, the outcome was already leaning in one direction. As the stop continued, the situation slowly began to escalate. Body camera footage later showed officers reacting to the strong smell of loud smoke coming from the vehicle. The odor was unmistakable. It immediately changed the tone of the encounter, prompting officers to press King about what else might be inside the car.
Hey, one of you niggas who done been to the penitentiary before, man. What happened when a motherfucker say somebody ain't right and they got there show their paperwork and they is right? What's the penalty for that? Can somebody tell me what is that punishable by?
And King didn't try to hide the situation. He didn't stall or attempt to talk around it. Instead, he responded directly. He admitted he had firearms on him. For many people who later watched the footage online, that moment was difficult to ignore. The son of one of the most recognizable names in trap music calmly acknowledging that he was carrying weapons while sitting in a vehicle filled with the smell of marijuana. The combination alone made the encounter feel heavier than an ordinary roadside stop.
But I'm gonna tell you like this, when I saw that, I think T.I. f***ing lying.
But the detail that truly caught the officer's attention wasn't just the smoke, the weapon, or even the warrant that appeared in the system. It was King's demeanor. Despite the pressure surrounding the situation, he remained composed. There were no sudden movements, no aggressive reactions, no shouting or resistance. His hands stayed visible. When officers instructed him to step out of the vehicle, he complied without hesitation. Even in a moment where many people might panic, his tone remained controlled. At one point during the exchange, officers themselves commented on how calm he seemed given the circumstances. The conversation carried an unusual tone, almost casual at times, even though everyone involved understood the seriousness of what was unfolding. That calm, however, didn't change the legal reality. Once the bench warrant appeared in the system, the officers didn't have much room to maneuver. Procedure took over. The situation moved from investigation to arrest within seconds. Handcuffs came out. His wrists were secured. And just like that, King Harris was taken into custody.
With the T.I. situation, if he did that, you're a fucking rat too. I don't spare no motherfucking body. Because if you doing anything wrong, you doing anything criminal-wise, and you cooperate with law enforcement to get you out of trouble, that means you're cooperating, that means you're a rat.
For anyone watching the footage later, it became the defining moment of the encounter. The kind of scene where the situation suddenly shifts from uncertain to undeniable. What began as a simple traffic stop had now crossed into something far more serious. From there, the process moved quickly. King was first transported to DeKalb County Jail, where the initial booking took place. After processing, arrangements were made to transfer him to Pickens County, the jurisdiction where the bench warrant had originally been issued. But even during the ride to the station, another detail surfaced that added a new layer to the situation.
Yeah. Can't help. That's my baby. That's my baby. Get it?
During conversation inside the patrol car, King casually revealed who his father was, Clifford T.I. Harris. The name landed immediately. For the officers involved, the realization changed the context of what they were witnessing. This wasn't simply another young driver caught during a traffic stop. Sitting in the back seat, in handcuffs like any other suspect, was the son of one of Atlanta's most well-known rap figures, a man widely known as the King of the South. When the footage eventually circulated online, that detail became impossible for viewers to ignore. Comment sections quickly filled with the same observation. Many people felt like they were watching history echo itself in real time. Years earlier, T.I. himself had faced his own legal battles involving weapons and federal charges. Courtrooms and jail cells had already been part of that family's story. Now, some people believed they were watching the next chapter unfold. But then the situation took a turn few expected.
I live with my grandma. You know, we'll go to the house on like a weekend. They'll say, hey, we shooting today. We need y'all at the house. They'll come get me from my grandma's house. And right after we done, when the cameras go off, I'm right back to my grandma's house. Yep.
Despite the smoke in the air, the weapons discovered during the stop, and the confirmed bench warrant, King Harris did not remain behind bars for long. By the very next day, October 15, 2024, the situation had already shifted again. The bench warrant that triggered the entire arrest was officially recalled, and King Harris was released. Just like that, he walked out of custody. On paper, it almost looked like the incident had disappeared as quickly as it had started. No additional charges were filed for the marijuana, and the firearms did not lead to new criminal counts either. In Georgia, licensed carry laws allow individuals to legally possess firearms under certain conditions, and small amounts of marijuana often result in citations rather than serious jail time. From a strictly legal standpoint, the situation was resolved quickly. The system processed the warrant, the issue was addressed, and the immediate legal threat faded almost overnight. But legal closure and public perception are rarely the same thing.
So what I'm saying is, they wasn't
talk like that outside.
Hey, I can talk how the f I want to wherever I'm at. I'm on live, Shawty. Stop talking to me. Stop talking to me. This ain't your f***ing restaurant. This ain't your f***ing restaurant. Everything you make, I can pull out my pocket right now. I ain't tripping on you. I ain't tripping. Get the hell out of my face. I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. Who the hell is he? What's your name? My name King. You know it and your mama know it. Tell your mama Happy Mother's Day. Tell your mama Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. File your shit. Come back. What? On game what? On game what? Come here. Come here. I'll show you what I do. Come here. I'll show you what I do. Come here. Come here. Come on.
Even though the courtroom side of the story ended quietly, the cultural reaction had already taken on a life of its own. The moment the arrest became public, King's name started circulating everywhere. TMZ ran the headlines. Hot New Hip Hop picked up the story. Blogs, podcasts, and commentary pages across the internet began breaking down the footage and the reports. The narrative spread fast. T.I.'s son arrested. Guns and marijuana discovered. Bench warrant confirmed. What had begun as a suburban traffic stop quickly transformed into a talking point inside hip-hop media.
Well, I mean, of course I spoke to my son. You know, me and his uncles. You know, we were perplexed by his necessity to go back and forth with the short order cook. I didn't understand why he felt he needed to stop what he was doing to engage someone who is at such another level of life. Now, I had to explain to him that, you know, when people are not living the way they hope they would live, and here you is walking in with so much freedom and luxury, and you know, people gonna posture themselves a certain way. So therefore, you're gonna have to enjoy your life. You're gonna have to remove yourself from that energy and go enjoy your life.
It stopped being a local police incident and became part of a larger conversation about image, influence, and expectations. And in that moment, King Harris's public reputation shifted. Legally, the event looked small. A brief stay in custody followed by a quick release. No extended jail time, no major new charges. But culturally, the meaning carried far more weight than the paperwork suggested. For years, T.I. had publicly spoken about his concerns regarding his son's behavior and the image he was trying to project. In multiple interviews, he had warned that chasing a street persona, especially while growing up in suburban environments, could eventually lead to consequences that couldn't be easily reversed. Those warnings were now being replayed across social media. People began pointing back to those earlier interviews, highlighting moments where T.I. openly said that King was moving in a direction that could lead to trouble. To many viewers, the traffic stop looked like the exact scenario he had been cautioning against. But the body camera footage complicated that narrative. When people finally watched the video, the image they expected didn't fully match what they saw. The footage didn't show a reckless young man yelling at police or escalating the situation. There was no shouting, no aggressive behavior, no dramatic confrontation. Instead, the interaction revealed something more restrained. King appeared calm, almost reflective. At several points during the stop, he spoke openly with officers. He acknowledged the situation and admitted he was unsure why the warrant had been issued. At one moment, he even asked whether he could contact his father to get clarity about what had happened.
If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you before any questioning if you wish. You can decide at any time to exercise these rights and not answer any of my questions or make any statements. So my question to you is, I found just a non-felony in that ashtray in the back, as well as in that basketball sleeve. So I'm gonna go over here and talk to these guys, and someone has to get charged with it. It's not you.
I'm not talking.
You're not gonna talk to me? I gotcha. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't.
You need anything to go with you?
My phone.
Your phone? Where's your phone at?
In the car.
We're in the car.
You search you.
I'm not looking for phones. I'm looking for drugs and guns.
Ask me on my phone.
What kind of phone is it?
What color is your phone?
It's a clear case on.
That brief exchange shifted the tone of the story for some viewers. The young man who had spent months online projecting a confident, street-focused image suddenly appeared different on camera. Sitting in handcuffs on the side of a suburban road, asking to call his father, he looked less like the persona people had debated online, and more like someone caught in a situation he hadn't fully expected. When the footage surfaced publicly in 2025, it quickly spread across YouTube and social media platforms. Commentary channels dissected every moment. Hip-hop discussion pages analyzed his tone, his body language, and the broader context surrounding the stop. The reactions were split. Some viewers treated the footage as confirmation of what they already believed. Critics argued that King had been trying to force a street identity that didn't match his reality. Atlanta's Black Star even published a blunt headline suggesting he was trying too hard to appear street. Others pushed back. Supporters pointed out that bench warrants related to traffic cases are far more common than people realize. Missing a court date, especially when notice issues occur, can happen to many young adults. To them, the arrest didn't prove anything about King's character.
I gotta say something about this, bro. Dwayne Wade, you gone too fucking far, dog. That is a male. A 12-year-old. At 12, they don't even know what their next meal gonna be. They don't have it figured out yet. He might meet a woman, anything at 16 and fall in love with her. But it's be gone. How you gonna, like, bro, you going too far, dog. Don't cut his off, bro. Like, bro, for real. If he gonna be gay, let him be gay. But don't cut his off, bro.
But in situations like this, perception often becomes more powerful than the legal facts. The image that spread across headlines was simple and memorable. T.I.'s son caught with guns and marijuana during suburban traffic stop. Once that narrative attached itself to his name, it became difficult to separate the details from the story people wanted to tell about it. Overnight, the situation reshaped how many people viewed him. For some, it reinforced the idea that he was genuinely involved in the street culture he often referenced. For others, it highlighted the complicated space he occupied, caught between celebrity upbringing and the expectations that came with it. But what appeared in official records was only one part of the story. While court documents showed a short jail stay and a release the next day, a different narrative began circulating quietly in the background. The rumors started spreading online throughout 2025. Some people claimed King Harris had already received a 5-year sentence. Others insisted he had been attacked inside county jail during his brief stay. And the loudest whispers suggested that T.I. himself had been reaching out to respected figures in the streets, asking them to make sure his son remained protected. Whether those claims were accurate or exaggerated, they quickly became part of the conversation. The image forming around the story was powerful. A father who had built his reputation through music, influence, and respect in Atlanta suddenly appearing in a different role. Not as an artist or businessman, but as a parent trying to shield his child from a system and a street code that rarely shows flexibility.
I am one of you niggas who have been to the penitentiary before, man. What happened when a motherfucker say somebody ain't right and they goddamn show their paperwork and they is right? What's the penalty for that? Can somebody tell me what is that punishable by? Somebody tell me that. See, most of you motherfuckers ain't never been in no trouble. Motherfuckers ain't never been nowhere. Anybody tell me. It been 20 years, bro. It been 20 years. I figure if I wasn't built like that, it'll show by now. It been 20 years, bro. I done faced every challenge a motherfucker that like to throw at me, man. You ain't seen me fold. You ain't seen me break down yet. Matter of fact, I come out smelling too good, the way you nigga think something wrong.
Because behind every viral clip of King flexing, arguing, or mouthing off online, there was always another presence hovering just outside the frame. That presence was Clifford Harris Jr., better known to the world as T.I., a father trying to navigate the impossible balance between public life and private responsibility. While King's October 2024 arrest dominated headlines for a moment, it was never just about a single traffic stop. It was one chapter in a much longer story that had been building inside the Harris family for years. The tension between father and son didn't appear overnight. It had been simmering long before those flashing blue lights appeared in Dunwoody. At its core, it was a clash of generations, pride, and identity. T.I. had spent decades building a reputation, surviving the music industry, the legal system, and the pressures that came with fame. King, on the other hand, was growing up in the middle of that spotlight, trying to define himself while the world watched every move. For years, T.I. had been openly voicing concerns about the direction his son seemed to be heading. In interviews, he rarely softened his words. He admitted publicly that he was worried. Whether it was videos of King getting into fights, clips of him arguing inside places like Waffle House, or moments online where weapons appeared during live streams, T.I. saw a pattern developing that he believed could lead somewhere dangerous. From his perspective, this wasn't simply teenage rebellion. To him, King seemed to be chasing the wrong kind of validation. And those warnings carried weight because T.I. knew exactly what that path looked like. Long before he became a rap icon, he had lived through the consequences that come with that lifestyle. His own history included multiple arrests, courtroom battles, and in 2009 he served a year in federal prison on weapons charges. Those experiences weren't distant memories to him. They were hard lessons. So when he spoke about the dangers of moving recklessly, he wasn't speaking hypothetically. He had lived through the reality himself. Over the years, T.I. made it clear that he tried to communicate that reality directly to his son. According to his own words in interviews, the message was simple and direct. If you keep moving like this, you're going to end up in prison. By the time King was arrested in October of 2024, many observers felt like they were watching that warning play out in real time. To them, the moment looked less like a surprise and more like a prediction finally catching up. But the deeper issues between father and son had already been visible long before the traffic stop ever happened. One of the most public examples came during a late 2023 Atlanta Falcons game. What began as a normal night at the stadium quickly turned into a moment that spread across social media within hours. Cameras captured a heated argument between King and T.I. right there in the stands. The footage went viral almost instantly. In the middle of that exchange, King raised his voice and made it clear that he rejected the idea that he had grown up as a sheltered celebrity child. He pushed back strongly against the narrative that he had been raised with a silver spoon in his mouth. According to King, his upbringing had been very different from what people assumed. He claimed that much of his childhood had been spent with his grandmother, away from the spotlight and the luxury people associated with his parents' success. In his view, the story people told about him didn't match the reality he believed he had experienced. For King, that moment wasn't just about an argument. It was about authenticity. He wanted the world to believe that he had faced real struggles, that he wasn't simply a product of celebrity wealth and privilege. For T.I., the moment carried a completely different meaning. From his perspective, hearing his son reject the stability and opportunities that had been built through years of hard work was deeply frustrating. Everything he had fought to create, the career, the financial security, the ability to give his children a safer life, seemed to be getting dismissed in front of thousands of people and millions watching online. That night at the Falcons Stadium became more than just a family disagreement. It turned into a symbol of the deeper conflict between them. A father trying to protect the future he had built, and a son determined to prove he could stand on his own identity. The argument played out like a public tug-of-war, with each side trying to assert their truth while the crowd around them and the internet beyond treated it like the latest viral moment. So when King Harris was pulled over in Dunwoody in October of 2024, and police discovered marijuana, firearms, and an active bench warrant tied to his name, the story carried far more weight than a typical arrest. To many observers, it felt like a family earthquake. The legal incident itself might have been brief, but the symbolism behind it was much bigger. It reinforced the tension people had already seen building between father and son. Yet there was one moment during the arrest that complicated the entire narrative. When King sat in handcuffs during that traffic stop, he asked officers if he could call his father. For viewers who later watched the footage, that request stood out. The young man, who often projected confidence and defiance online, suddenly revealed a different side of himself. Behind the bravado, behind the arguments and viral confrontations, there was still a son looking toward his father when the situation became serious. It was a quiet reminder that beneath the public persona and the heated exchanges, the connection between them had never fully disappeared. Publicly, T.I. kept his composure. There were no explosive Instagram rants, no dramatic press conferences, and no visible outbursts directed at the media. On the surface, he appeared calm, almost detached from the chaos surrounding the situation. But people familiar with what was happening behind the scenes described a very different reality. According to those reports, T.I. was actively working the situation from every angle. Phone calls were being made, lawyers were contacted, court clerks were checked in with. Quiet conversations were happening out of public view. While the headlines focused on King Harris in handcuffs, his father was reportedly doing everything he could to stabilize the situation before it grew larger. And the concern wasn't limited to legal consequences alone. For T.I., the issue also touched something far bigger: reputation. Over the last decade, he had carefully reshaped his public identity. He was no longer viewed simply as a rapper from Atlanta. His name had evolved into something broader. He had stepped into roles as a television personality, a businessman, a public commentator, and a father who often spoke openly about responsibility and growth. The image he had built was that of a man who had learned from his past and moved forward. So when news spread that his son had been arrested with firearms and marijuana connected to a bench warrant, the situation carried implications that went far beyond one family incident. It threatened to pull attention back toward the same kinds of problems he had spent years trying to distance himself from. From that perspective, the arrest didn't just look like a personal issue. It looked like something that could ripple across the brand he had constructed piece by piece. But just as the immediate fallout from the arrest began to settle, another development changed the direction of the story once again. While T.I. was managing the aftermath of his son's legal trouble, King Harris was stepping into an entirely new role. In November of 2024, only weeks after the arrest, King and his longtime partner, Janija Nana Epps, welcomed a baby boy into the world. The child was named King Jr. The timing wasn't lost on anyone who had been following the situation. Within a short span of weeks, King had moved from being arrested during a traffic stop to becoming a father himself. For T.I., the moment carried a strange mixture of emotions that he later hinted at during a radio interview with Hot 107.9. During that conversation, he made a remark that sounded humorous at first, but carried a deeper meaning underneath. The comment was delivered like a joke, yet it reflected something more complicated about the situation unfolding in front of him. It suggested that the cycle of fatherhood was repeating itself. The rebellious son who had been clashing with his father was now responsible for raising a child of his own. The same responsibilities that had once been placed in front of him were now becoming his reality. For many families, moments like these happen quietly. An arrest might remain private. A family disagreement might fade away without anyone outside the household ever hearing about it. The lessons and mistakes stay within the walls of the home. But the Harris family doesn't live in that kind of privacy. Every disagreement, every controversy, every mistake becomes public discussion almost immediately. Media outlets analyze it. Blogs write headlines about it. Social media turns it into commentary and memes that circulate endlessly. When King was arrested, the story spread across multiple platforms. Sites like Atlanta Black Star published articles questioning his desire to project a street image. Comment sections filled with debates about whether he was trying too hard to prove himself. Online audiences treated the entire situation as entertainment. For T.I., that meant something personal was being turned into public evaluation. Every parenting decision, every warning he had given his son, every moment of tension between them was now open for strangers to judge. For King, the effect was different but equally intense. Every mistake he made became evidence for critics who believed he was reckless or desperate for validation. Together, their relationship started to look less like a private family dynamic and more like a story people watched unfold in real time. It became a strange mix of hip-hop legacy, reality television energy, and a cautionary tale about fame and expectations. Even King himself seemed aware of how people viewed the relationship between him and his father. At one point, he described their dynamic using a comparison that many people immediately recognized. He said their relationship reminded him of Ghost and Tariq from the television series Power. The comparison wasn't random. Ghost, the father figure in that story, spent years building power and trying to escape the dangers of his past. His goal was to protect his family and prevent his son from repeating the same mistakes. Tariq, the son, rejected that protection. He wanted independence. He wanted to prove himself on his own terms, even if that meant stepping directly into the same dangers his father had tried to avoid. For many observers, the parallel felt almost exact. T.I. often spoke about recognizing pieces of his own past when he looked at his son's present choices. He understood the temptations and pressures that could lead someone down certain roads. King, however, seemed to interpret those warnings differently. Instead of seeing them as protection, he sometimes appeared to view them as restrictions. He believes he has to break away in order to define himself. That belief drives many of the choices people see from the outside, and the public reacts to every moment of it. Each stumble, every argument, every legal twist quickly becomes another viral clip circulating across timelines. But what keeps people watching the Harris family story isn't just the fame, the money, or even the controversy surrounding it. It's the human tension underneath it all. At the center of the story is a father who clearly cares about his son, yet fears the direction his choices could take him. On the other side is a son who, despite the public defiance, still carries the weight of growing up under that father's name. Beneath the arguments and headlines sits a complicated relationship built on pride, frustration, and an unspoken bond neither side seems fully willing to admit in public. The Harris family exists in a strange space between privilege and authenticity. They live with resources and opportunities most families never experience, yet at the same time they face struggles that feel painfully familiar to many people watching from the outside. That contradiction creates the tension people keep returning to. In one moment they appear larger than life, and in the next, they look like a family dealing with the same generational conflicts that unfold in households everywhere. By the time 2025 arrived, it had become clear that King Harris's story had moved far beyond the traffic stop that started the headlines. The arrest in Dunwoody was only the beginning. What followed transformed the situation into something much broader. It became a story about generational friction, about the complicated legacy that follows families in hip-hop, and about the difficult question that always seems to follow children of famous figures. Can they ever truly create their own identity? For King Harris, the answer to that question would define everything that came next. The next phase of his life would determine whether he could eventually be seen as more than simply the son of T.I. It would show whether fatherhood, music, and his own personal decisions could shape a legacy that belonged to him alone. That uncertainty now hangs over his future. Will becoming a father and continuing his music career push him toward growth, responsibility, and stability? Or will the same spotlight that amplified his mistakes continue pulling him back into controversy? Because for King, the stakes extend far beyond music. His path forward is tied to questions of survival, redemption, and identity. The challenge is not only about building a career with beats and bars. It's about stepping out from under the label that critics keep repeating. The label of being permanently defined as T.I.'s troubled son. When people talk about King Harris in 2025, the conversation almost always begins in the same place. It circles back to that night in October. The flashing blue lights in Dunwoody, the body camera footage that spread across the internet, the mugshot that appeared across blogs and social media pages. Those images became the visual shorthand people associate with his name. But his story doesn't end in that parking lot. The real question lies in what happens afterward. King Harris now stands at the intersection of several different roles at once. He is an artist attempting to establish himself in the music industry. He is a young father learning how to carry responsibility for another life. And he is also the son of one of hip-hop's most recognizable figures, navigating a relationship that has already played out publicly in ways few families ever experience. Meanwhile, rumors and speculation continue to circulate around him. Stories about gang tensions, alleged jailhouse drama, and whispered threats have moved through blogs and social media conversations. Those claims dominate headlines and keep attention fixed on his name. But the deeper reality is simpler. King Harris's life is unfolding in real time, with every decision becoming part of a public narrative that never seems to pause. Unlike most people his age, his mistakes and his progress are both visible to millions watching from the outside. On one side, he continues trying to develop his music career. On the other, he is adjusting to fatherhood. And running through the middle of it all is the ongoing tension with his father, a relationship that has already shaped much of how the public understands his story. The timeline shifted again on November 5, 2024. Only weeks after the arrest, King and his longtime partner, Janija Nana Epps, welcomed their baby boy into the world. The child was born at exactly 8:09 a.m. Shortly afterward, King shared the news publicly, introducing his son as King Jr., with a message that read, "Welcome King Jr., time to take over." For many observers, the moment felt symbolic. Becoming a father at 20 years old is a life-changing experience for anyone. But in King's case, the timing added an unusual layer of meaning. Just weeks earlier, he had been sitting in handcuffs during a traffic stop, asking officers if he could call his father for help. Now he was holding his own child in his arms. On the surface, the situation carried a certain irony. The rebellious son who had spent years challenging his father's authority was suddenly stepping into the exact role he had resisted. But underneath that irony was something more serious. It was a reminder that cycles repeat themselves. The responsibilities that once felt distant suddenly become real. The lessons that once sounded like lectures begin to carry different meaning. How King handles this chapter of fatherhood could shape everything that follows. The way he navigates this role may determine whether his own son grows up escaping the mistakes that have followed their family, or whether the same patterns eventually return under the same spotlight. At the same time, another path continues running parallel to that responsibility: music. For years, King has been releasing tracks and working to develop his presence as an artist. Since his teenage years, he has tried to carve out a lane that belongs to him, separate from the shadow cast by his father's legacy. But the October arrest changed the context of that effort. Suddenly, the conversation surrounding King Harris shifted. It was no longer centered on his music, his sound, or the direction of his career. Instead, attention turned toward a different question entirely. People began debating whether he was truly built for the life he often portrayed. On one side, the controversy generated attention, the kind of attention many young artists struggle to attract. In an industry where visibility often determines success, the headlines ensured that his name stayed in circulation. But on the other side, that same attention complicated how his music was being received. His artistry was now caught in an uncomfortable position. Listeners were no longer approaching his songs with neutral ears. Every release came wrapped in the context of the arrest, the viral footage, and the debates surrounding his identity. The question hovering over his career became unavoidable. Was he an artist developing his voice, or would he always be seen as another rapper whose reputation was shaped more by controversy than creativity? King Harris understood that controversy carries power. It draws eyes, it fuels conversations, and in many cases, it can push an artist into the spotlight faster than years of traditional promotion. But controversy also carries a risk. especially when it begins overshadowing the work itself. When King released the track Dear Son, following the birth of his child, listeners didn't approach the song the way they might approach a typical release. People weren't just curious about the music, they were searching for answers. They wanted to hear whether this moment represented a turning point. Would the song reflect growth? Would it reveal regret about the situations that had placed him in the headlines? Or would it reinforce the defiant image that had followed him online for so long? Some listeners wondered whether the release might sound like an attempt to reset the narrative after the mugshots and arrest footage had spread across the internet. Because by that point, every stream carried a layer of skepticism. Each play came with listeners watching carefully, trying to interpret what his words actually meant. For King, that scrutiny created a new challenge. The risk wasn't simply that critics might dislike the music. The deeper risk was that his name could become permanently tied to controversy rather than the art he was trying to create. In other words, people might remember the arrest long after they forgot the songs. Industry observers had already begun pointing out that dynamic. Even Billboard noted the complicated reality faced by artists who grow up in the shadow of celebrity parents. Opportunities tend to appear quickly. Doors open earlier than they might for unknown artists. But those opportunities come with enormous expectations. Every release is measured against the parent's legacy. Every mistake receives amplified attention. Comparisons become unavoidable. King himself seemed aware of that tension. When discussing his relationship with T.I., he once described their dynamic using a comparison drawn from the television series Power. He said their bond resembled the complicated relationship between Ghost and Tariq, a mixture of loyalty, frustration, admiration, and rebellion. That comparison carried weight because it reflected something deeper than a simple metaphor. It captured the ongoing struggle King faces as he tries to establish independence while remaining connected to the legacy that shaped him. That tension appears not only in interviews and public arguments, but also in the themes present in his music. For better or worse, the label attached to him remains constant. He is widely recognized as T.I.'s son. That association is impossible to ignore, and it forms part of the brand surrounding his name, whether he embraces it or resists it. But King's situation isn't unique within hip-hop history. The genre has seen many similar stories unfold. Children of influential artists often face the same dilemma. Some examples come quickly to mind. Lil Romeo spent years building a career while carrying the weight of Master P's massive influence in the industry. More recently, Coi Leray has spoken openly about the constant comparisons made between her and her father, Benzino, as she worked to establish her own identity. In each case, the same question follows. Is the artist succeeding because of their talent, or because of the name attached to them? King Harris now finds himself standing inside that same conversation. Every move he makes is watched with the expectation that he must prove himself independent of the legacy surrounding him. Even moments outside the studio contribute to that narrative. The argument between King and T.I. at the Atlanta Falcons game became another piece of the larger puzzle. During that exchange, King loudly rejected the idea that he had grown up surrounded by privilege. He insisted that his childhood involved spending significant time with his grandmother, rather than living exclusively inside the luxury associated with his parents' success. For him, the statement was an attempt to reclaim authenticity. He wanted to push back against the idea that he was simply a celebrity child benefiting from comfort and wealth. That desire to establish credibility explains many of the decisions critics point to, including moments where he displayed weapons online or leaned into controversial imagery. But that effort creates a paradox. The harder he tries to distance himself from the label of a privileged celebrity child, the more media coverage seems to reinforce that exact narrative. Attempts to prove authenticity often become interpreted as evidence that he is trying too hard to appear something he is not. In that way, King Harris's story reflects a broader pattern within hip-hop culture. Many of the pioneers who built the genre began their careers describing life in difficult environments. They rapped about survival, hustling, and the realities of the streets. Over time, many of those artists transformed their success into businesses, brands, and generational wealth. Their children grew up in a very different environment. But when those children look back at the images and stories from their parents' early careers, the past can sometimes appear more authentic than the stability that replaced it. T.I.'s journey reflects that exact transformation. He once built his reputation through stories of the streets, risk, and survival. Later, he reinvented himself as an entrepreneur, a television personality, and a father figure speaking about responsibility and growth. Yet when King looks at that history, the image that seems to stand out most strongly is the earlier one. He sees the hustler. He sees the outlaw. He sees the trap legend. And in his eyes, that version of the story feels more real than the quiet stability that came afterward. Instead of simply accepting the life that stability created, King began chasing his own version of authenticity. That tension is exactly what has driven the growing distance between father and son. Even T.I. himself has acknowledged it openly in interviews. He has said plainly that King is determined to do things his own way, regardless of how many warnings or lessons are placed in front of him. That stubborn streak, according to T.I., is something he recognizes immediately. In many ways, it mirrors the same determination that once defined his own rise. But within the context of their relationship, that stubbornness has become a dividing line rather than a shared strength. It reflects a deeper struggle that appears again and again among the children of hip-hop icons. These are young people who grow up surrounded by success, wealth, and opportunity, yet still feel pulled towards something their parents cannot hand them: street credibility. That desire sits quietly at the center of the conflict. For King Harris, the urge to establish his own authenticity has become intertwined with how he presents himself to the world. For T.I., that same urge looks dangerously familiar. He sees the same roads he once walked, the same temptations that nearly destroyed his own future, and he understands exactly where those roads can lead. This is where the clash between them becomes unavoidable. And because the Harris family lives under constant public attention, every disagreement between them spreads far beyond the walls of their home. Moments that might remain private for most families become shared spectacles. The heated argument captured at the Atlanta Falcons game, the tense exchanges posted across social media, the body camera footage showing King sitting in handcuffs, asking officers if he could call his father. None of those moments stayed contained. Each one traveled across the internet, replayed and analyzed by millions of viewers, as if the entire family dynamic were unfolding inside a scripted television series. But the reality behind those clips is far more complicated than entertainment. When King compared his relationship with T.I. to the characters Ghost and Tariq from the television series Power, the comparison resonated because it captured something real about their dynamic. Ghost represents the father who clawed his way out of dangerous circumstances and built something lasting. He understands the cost of the life he once lived and wants to protect his child from repeating the same mistakes. Tariq represents the son who refuses that protection. He wants to define himself independently, even if doing so means stepping into the same risks his father fought to escape. That comparison wasn't exaggeration. It was a metaphor that reflected the generational struggle playing out between them. A struggle built from love, pride, resentment, and the constant effort by both sides to prove their perspective is the right one. One man trying to protect, another determined to rebel. In many ways, the situation resembles a dramatic story unfolding in front of a global audience. Except this stage isn't a theater. It's the internet, where every moment becomes permanent and every decision carries consequences that ripple far beyond the people directly involved. Now, King Harris stands at one of the most important turning points of his life. The birth of his son introduced a new possibility, one that could reshape everything that comes next. For the first time, he holds the chance to step outside the cycle that has defined so much of his relationship with his father. Fatherhood can transform a person. It can become the stabilizing force that pushes someone toward maturity and responsibility. At the same time, it can also introduce pressures that feel overwhelming, especially when those pressures are unfolding under constant public scrutiny. Every decision he makes as a parent will be observed. Every mistake will be documented, debated, and shared across platforms. Screenshots will circulate. Commentary will follow. The spotlight surrounding his life is unlikely to fade. The real question is how he will respond to that pressure. Will fatherhood become the experience that strengthens him, forcing him to grow into a more disciplined and focused version of himself? Or will the weight of expectations push him further into the chaos that has already surrounded his name? Alongside fatherhood, Another test remains just as important: his music. Controversy can generate attention, but attention alone does not create credibility. If King Harris wants to establish himself as a serious artist, he faces the challenge of turning the events surrounding his life into something meaningful within his work. The arrest, the argument with his father, the rumors circulating around him, the complicated family dynamic that continues playing out in public view. All of those experiences contain the raw material for storytelling. But transforming that material into music that resonates requires honesty and depth. Listeners tend to recognize the difference between authenticity and performance. If King can take those experiences and translate them into music that feels genuine, there remains a possibility that he could create his own lane. A path defined not by headlines or viral controversies, but by the substance of the work itself. But if the focus remains only on viral moments and online attention, the outcome could look very different. History has seen many artists become remembered more for the controversies surrounding them than the art they tried to create. That path leads toward becoming a cautionary tale rather than a lasting voice in the culture. And the Harris name carries significant weight within hip-hop. T.I.'s career was built slowly over years of struggle, setbacks, and eventual success. His legacy grew from the lessons he learned and the empire he eventually constructed through persistence and reinvention. Now that legacy sits heavily on his son's shoulders. The world is watching to see whether King Harris will elevate that legacy further, or place it under strain through the decisions he makes moving forward. Because every step he takes carries meaning beyond his own life. Each victory or failure reflects back on the father who has spent years warning him about the road ahead. Each decision becomes another chapter in a larger story about inheritance, pride, and the complex burden of growing up in the shadow of greatness. Right now, King Harris stands at that crossroads. On one side of the story sits the image many critics continue to repeat: the narrative of a privileged young man chasing a street identity that could eventually consume him. It's a storyline that spreads easily online because it fits neatly into the headlines people expect to see. Every arrest, every argument, every controversial clip adds another layer to that perception. But on the other side, there remains another possibility. A different path still exists, one shaped by fatherhood, by artistic growth, and by the maturity that sometimes arrives through hard lessons. The direction King Harris ultimately chooses will determine how this story continues. The next viral headline attached to his name could be another mugshot circulating across blogs. Or it could be something very different, a milestone in music, a record that earns real recognition within the culture. The distance between those outcomes is determined by the choices that come next. Because when the noise fades and the rumors settle, the larger story surrounding the Harris family is not really about gangs, jail time, or the endless cycle of internet gossip. At its core, it is about a family navigating change while the entire world watches. A father attempting to guide his son away from the mistakes he once made himself. A son struggling to prove that his identity is more than the legacy he inherited. That tension between protection and independence forms the emotional center of the entire saga. It explains why each public moment between them draws so much attention. People aren't just reacting to the controversy. They are watching a generational struggle unfold in real time. King Harris exists inside that spotlight. He is no longer simply viewed as T.I.'s child. He has become a rapper trying to establish his voice, a father responsible for raising a new life, and a public figure whose actions are constantly observed and interpreted. Living under that level of scrutiny means every misstep becomes amplified. A small mistake becomes a headline. A disagreement becomes a viral clip. Even moments of growth are examined closely, as people try to determine whether change is real or temporary. The internet often exaggerates these moments, stretching small details into larger narratives. But in this case, exaggeration isn't even necessary. The situation already carries enough weight on its own. A young man stands at the intersection of privilege and authenticity, attempting to define himself while standing in the long shadow cast by his father's empire. That position creates pressure few people ever experience. Every move forward becomes a test. Every setback becomes evidence used by critics who believe they already know how the story will end. But the truth is still unfolding. The speculation surrounding rumors, including claims about whether T.I. reached out to protect his son from potential threats, has fueled endless discussion online. Yet those rumors miss the deeper point entirely. The real question is not what others may or may not have done behind the scenes. The real question is whether King Harris will rise to the moment in front of him. Whether he will take the opportunity to grow beyond the controversies that have followed his name. Whether fatherhood, music, and experience will reshape the direction of his life before the same patterns repeat themselves. Right now, the answer remains unwritten. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps people watching. Because this story has never simply been about one arrest, one argument, or one viral moment. It is about a young man standing at the edge of two different futures, knowing that the next decisions he makes could define how the world remembers his name. Whether King Harris becomes another cautionary tale or something far more powerful will depend on the choices he makes from here. And that chapter is only just beginning.